Let me put this up real fast.
Welcome, everyone, to Rutgers at the voice of college football. Rutgers suffers a heartbreaking loss to Penn State 40-36, making many of the mistakes that Rutgers had made all year, but also some additional terrible developments late in the fourth quarter that sealed the fate for Rutgers and a 5-7 season with no bowl game. I'm here with my fantastic co-host, Gabriel Pickup and Donovan Gibbs. We're going to talk about the game, Rutgers' future, and what went wrong. So, Gabe, let's start with you. What happened here?
I'm just in disbelief. I mean, I'm like, this is the first time on the show that I think I've suffered an Illinois-like heartbreak, except this is worse than the Illinois game. This is a lot worse because this is directly the season on the line. This is Athan's last game. This is Eric O'Neill's last game, DT Sheffield, Gus Zielinskis, and this is how you go out? I mean, holy crap. It's not like we played a bad game, but you see the term mental mistakes being floated around, and you think, what's the difference between mental mistakes and bad execution? Well, it's what we saw with 7:40 left in the fourth quarter when Athan – now, I did this example on the show before we started, but he literally was like that, and before he even got to throw the ball back, the ball just said, you want to see a magic trick? I can make your grip disappear, and it just dropped, and Penn State capitalized perfectly. I mean, we were fatiguing the hell out of them. They looked defeated. We had the ball up 3 on their side of the field with 7 minutes and 40 seconds left, driving down the clock, getting ready for either a Jay Patel field goal or for an indisputable Antoine Raymond touchdown because he was playing amazing out there. His second best performance as a college pro, right behind that game against Maryland. And one mistake changed everything, and they scored. And instead of hitting the reset button, we went back to our old ways, our same old, you could even call it the same old Rutgers, and that is why we need a culture change. I'm not calling for anyone's firing, but I am going to say something needs to be done in the offseason. It's going to be an interesting offseason because we have 3 talents that we must hold on to. Antoine Raymond, KJ Duff, and Ian Strong must all be on this team again next year. Everything else, who the hell knows?
Donovan, what do you think? Is Donovan frozen?
It was a tough loss, and it's just for nah, I'm right here.
You're good, just a bit of a delay.
Hopefully y'all can hear me. But the first 53 minutes of that game by Rutgers was amazing, and then the final 7 minutes is what completely shifted the season from a potential bowl berth to just now the season ending. And for Athan Kaliakmanis, that final 7 minutes of his career is something that's going to stay with him for a long period of time, especially knowing that on that play, as we're mentioning, that 4th and 2, he honestly had Kenny Fletcher wide open. They were reading Dennis Sutton. For the most part of that game, Dennis Sutton was being shut down by Taylor Needham and Taj White, so kudos to them. He didn't really get his first sack into the game until the final 5 minutes of the game, and they were reading him with a potential read option with a throw to the flat. Kenny Fletcher was wide open in the flat, and it genuinely looked like Athan was trying to throw the ball, but his body just wasn't catching up with his brain. And that's something that does happen to athletes sometimes, where the processing of the game is so fast, you're trying to do something that your body isn't prepared for yet. And the ball completely dropped out, and Amari Campbell was right there to scoop it up. I have the clip right here. I wanted to show y'all it because it's honestly just it's honestly just shocking that
because Adam
the game was this close, and then all right, can y'all see this?
Yes, sir. Look at this, Adam.
2nd and 7. He just drops the ball.
What happened?
And then scooped up by Mark Campbell.
I mean, we already had Thanksgiving. I didn't know we were still getting.
Also, the thing is, they were at Penn State's 33-yard line with a chance of going in on a score. KJ Duff, I think just one play before that or two plays before that, made an immaculate one-hand grab. And for the most part, out of all three prospects that you said, Antoine Raymond, Ian Strong, KJ Duff, KJ looks like the best one out of all three that's going to have a ton of eyes on him in the transfer portal, because the game he just had against Penn State, he was the primary guy against Ohio State as well. He was the only one that was really making catches against Ohio State. For the second half of the year, it's really been the KJ Duff show, and his performance today, over 100 yards receiving, hit 1,000 yards receiving as well on the season. And also for Rutgers, this is a 3K, 1K, 1K offense that wasn't able to reach 6 wins, and that's another thing that's just completely shocking, because typically when you have 3 players on your team that's able to go for over 3,000 yards passing, 1,000 yards rushing, and 1,000 yards receiving, typically you're in a good spot to be in a bowl berth. For a lot of teams, even in the Big Ten, they don't even got that. So it's a tough loss and a tough pill to swallow for Rutgers' players, Rutgers' coaching staffs, and especially for Greg Schiano, because this was supposed to be the game where he was going to hit 100 career wins with Rutgers.
Yeah, well, here's how I see it. There are some teams that find a way to win. There are other teams that find a way to lose. And I was there for the first half at Shea Stadium today. And what I saw was that Rutgers had a unique opportunity to defeat Penn State because Penn State could not stop us. They couldn't stop Raymond on the ground. They couldn't stop Ethan through the air. We were almost scoring at will. Of course, as has been the case our whole season, our defense was not playing well. Gave up over 500 yards, gave up 295 or 300 yards rushing. Terrible performance. But still, we were in a position to win. And yet, we found a way to lose with Ethan's fumble, the inability to get 1 yard on 4th down, and a penalty on 3rd and 26 that gives Penn State a first down. That's when you talk about culture, Gabe.
That holding call was terrible.
You are finding ways to lose. And every game this season that we lost in different ways. We'd start strong, we'd finish weak. We get blown out by Oregon. We are close with Ohio State in the first half, get blown out in the second half, whether it was inconsistency, failure to make adjustments. Every way that we found was to lose. And this game against Penn State was yet a new and different way to lose by making uncharacteristic mistakes at critical moments in the fourth quarter when we should have been up 10, instead find ourselves down 4. So, Rutgers needs to be a team that finds ways to win instead of finding ways to lose. And this season is an example of finding ways to lose.
Yeah, finding ways to lose. And in the few games that the defense has showed up, of course, the offense hasn't showed up. And the vast majority of games where the offense did show up, the defense was non-existent for at least 90% of the game. And with this performance, it's weird because the defense would sprinkle itself in for a few possessions, but ultimately the rushing, I believe they had 400 yards rushing or something like that. And I believe Gruckmeyer, however you say Ethan's name, their quarterback, he didn't really get too many yards, but he was Grunkmeyer. He was mega efficient against us. And ultimately, this game was such a perfect euphemism of the season. You start off hot, it looks promising, and then ultimately same old Rutgers occurs. And I'm afraid that as long as stuff remains the same, whether it's with coaching or scheming or recruiting strategy, whatever it is, we're just going to be same old Rutgers year in and year out. And the most we can ever hope for is winning a 6-win, 7-win bowl.
I will say, yes, Penn State ran the ball for 300 yards exactly. Most of those yards were in the first half. I think at the end of the first half, they had 200 yards rushing because there was multiple chunk runs, and a lot of their runs were getting up to the safety in the first half. That I was absolutely shocked. Nick Singleton and Katron Allen, if it wasn't for Jet Elad, they honestly both could have ran for over 200 yards apiece because he was the Jet Elad and for the most part Cam Miller as well. They were the two safeties that were the last line of defense to even stop most of their runs. And in the second half, Rutgers defense was able to pick up. They were only able to run the ball for only like 100 yards in the second half. And outside of that 49-yarder by Katron Allen after the holding call at the end of the game, for the most part, the two running backs were pretty much bottled up, and you have to give some credit where credit is due to the defense for that. It was just that when the defense was able to get 3-and-outs and sometimes were able to stop them on fourth down, Rutgers' offense wasn't able to respond with points. And you can look at them leaving points on the board, whether it was with the Ethan Kaliakmanis fumble that could have led them to a 2-score lead, or the Jai Patel fake field goal on the second drive of the game, which left 3 points on the board. Those instances by the offense not being able to finish despite the amazing offensive performances by Kenny Fletcher, KJ Duff, Antoine Raymond, Ian Strong wasn't able to really be used in this offense as much today. They were really had him bottled up. DT Sheffield had one amazing play, but outside of that, he was pretty much quiet as well. So you have to look at a lot of those players on the offense that didn't really leave it all on the field today, and that's really it's really unfortunate because the offensive line looked amazing. Zane Durant and Dennis Sutton. Dennis Sutton were completely bottled up for most of that game. Outside of the late sack and with 5 minutes left remaining by Dennis Sutton, he really wasn't a factor. And going into this season and going into this game, they were looking at those two to really make an impact. Taj White and Taylor Needham were able to really shut that down. And Ethan wasn't really feeling pressure outside of the Dominic DeLuca sack, which he was the linebacker that he was supposed to be hot off of. So for the most part, Rutgers' offensive line did their job. It was just you got to look at the skill guys, and some of the skill guys. Antoine Raymond still did his thing. KJ Duff did his thing. Kenny Fletcher was able to make an impact on a lot of the plays that he was in. He was able to make big plays out of just 3-yard catches and turn those into first downs. But for the most part, the rest of that wide receiving core was not able to step up to the plate, and that's the huge difference between Rutgers being 6-6 and being 5-7. Like what Terry Smith said after the game in his post-game interview on the field, they were able to find a way to win. And so far this season, Rutgers just wasn't able to finish game strong, whether it was Iowa, whether it was Minnesota, and now with Penn State, it's unfortunate.
Yeah, if you're looking at the Rutgers fan base and wondering why they're all so pessimistic, look at me. I have been optimistic all year, taking the good out of a bad situation. But this is the final straw that broke the camel's back. I cannot be optimistic anymore. Some serious change must happen. I can't put on a politically correct act or a commercialized face just to keep recruits or commits coming to this school. This was probably the worst choke I've seen from a college football team with my own eyes. And that goes back to, I think, Alabama's missed field goal that caused Auburn to run it back. I mean, because at least these are executional.
Worst chokes is the kick six.
At least these are executional failures. This was the complete mental mental lapse. And I pray for Ethan because I love Ethan. He is probably the most talented quarterback Rutgers has ever had. But consider the fact that this cost us a bowl game. I don't want that to be his legacy. I want his legacy to be that he threw for over 3,000 yards. He had one of the best seasons in Rutgers football history from a quarterback. And I hope that he finds his shot in the NFL because for us, it looks slim to none. But we thought it was slim to none for Kyle Monangai. And now he's out there being RB1 for the Chicago Bears. But I digress. I reel back a bit. This Rutgers team, the only positive I can take away is that the offensive line is here to stay. That is a bar. Rhyming off the top of my head, but I think this Pat Flaherty offensive line is it's hopefully as long as Pat Flaherty is here and he doesn't get an offer to go be an OC for someone else. That's one consistency we can have. Yes, there have been a lot of chokes, Jason. I'm kind of hyperbolizing a little bit just because I'm so frustrated and I'm trying to remain composed by sounding ridiculous, but we need a lot of change in the offseason, and we don't just need our big three to stay offensively. But once again, we need a complete defensive overhaul. And it's going to be probably another ugly defensive season next season if we keep it up. But we need something to change, and it starts with the defense.
Yeah,
I just want to piggyback real fast on what you said there, Gabe, because I just saw Jason O's comment about how well Antoine Raymond played, and you mentioned it earlier that this was his second best game since the Maryland game. Me personally, I say this is his best game this entire season. 253 yards all purpose. He had the long receiving touchdown as well. This was the most yards by a skilled player against Penn State since the early 2000s, and you got to give credit where credit's due on that. Penn State has a really good defense as it is, despite most of their defense being hurt or giving up points to UCLA and Northwestern earlier in the year. This is still the cream of the crop when it comes to athletes in the Big Ten. So Antoine Raymond being able to do that, especially in the final game of the year, is very, very much impressive. Back to you, Adam. My apologies. I just had to add that in.
No problem at all. All I was going to say is, look, if you're going to have a successful culture and a successful team, you have to be good in all three phases of the game. All right. You have to have consistency. You got to play with confidence, and you have to have great coaching. And throughout the year, we were entirely inconsistent. Some games, certain players would do better than others. The only thing that really was consistent was our defense was consistently terrible all year. As far as confidence goes, we didn't play confident against Oregon. We didn't play confident in the second half against Iowa. We didn't play confident against Ohio State. And then also coaching. I don't know what the defensive coordinator is doing or the cornerbacks coach or the defensive line coach is doing, but our defense has been terrible. So that's a recipe for disaster. But having said that, had you told me without knowing anything else that Ethan would be 16 of 22 for 338 yards and 3 touchdowns, that Antoine would have 29 carries for 189 yards and a 6.5 average, and that Rutgers would have 533 yards of total offense, including a very balanced 338 passing yards and 195 rushing yards for 8.3 yards per play, with more first downs than Penn State, better third down efficiency, and winning the time of possession, I would say we won that game. Instead, we lost it. We lost it because we found a way to lose again. And it wasn't the same way that we've lost in the past. We found a way to lose through the fumble, the late call on the corner that took a 3rd and 26 to a 1st and 10, and the failure to get it on 4th and 1. So if this team's culture is one that people say is the same old Rutgers, that's telling you that the trajectory of the program is really just more of the same, and that there needs to be an overhaul, because what today showed was that when Rutgers was in a perfect chance to win the game and snatch victory, Ethan drops the ball.
You know what?
It's inexcusable. They find ways to lose.
I know. Look, we all know that Rutgers can compete with pretty much anybody, but most people that follow college football don't know that, and they think that Rutgers is a lot worse than we really are. I mean, realistically, we're probably in the 50 to 80 range in terms of talent in college football. But a lot of people will think of Rutgers football and they'll think we're like 120s, maybe even 130s. And we know better than that, but nobody else does. And if nobody else knows that we're this good, what we need to do is have a signature win. And dare I say, we didn't have a signature win all season. There were several chances to. The closest one, of course, was Maryland to being a signature win. But in terms of the ones that we didn't win was probably Iowa or Minnesota. And even Minnesota, you could argue, wouldn't have been a signature win. But that's what we need. That's what we missed all year. That's how you get people to take you seriously, is you have moments. You upset one of your opponents that you're the underdog against. And we only did that once, and it was against Maryland, who had a losing record on the year. Went in, I believe, losing 6 in a row, and then we beat them. That's not going to help when it comes to recruiting, when it comes to the transfer portal. You can't recruit players that don't even realize that you're middle of the pack, let alone good. So that's what needs to change next season, is if we're going to have a new defense, new staff, at least on the defensive side of the football, we need signature wins to back it, or the Twitter heads, the Instagrammers, the TikTokers, they're all going to be in players' minds before, pen to paper what is actually put out on the product in terms of product on the field that's just not going to work. We need wins.
You do want to know how you recruit, though, in these situations. You got to go off of individual performances. And for a lot of wide receivers that want to come to Rutgers, or quarterbacks that might want to come to Rutgers, or running backs, you're looking at that big core three. Right now, KJ Dove has more receiving yards at the end of the year than Jeremiah Smith. Nobody thought about that coming into the year, and that you can credit that to KJ Dove's hard work during the all season, but you also have to credit that to Rutgers' passing game and the schemes that they run to get KJ in these perfect situations to make plays. So you have to look at that as well when it comes to all season recruiting, because I definitely believe a lot of players, yes, they're going to look at where they want to go for winning programs, but they also want to be in places where they're going to have opportunities to shine. A lot of players aren't just trying to go sit and be deep into another team's depth chart when they have the opportunity to do the same, to show off their potential on a different team, despite their record of win or losses. So right now, that's where Rutgers is currently in right now when it comes to recruiting, and especially in the transfer portal, because to be completely honest, a lot of their players are most likely going to hit the portal. It's just something that we see in general, just because of the stature of the game, especially after the season that they just had. There was a lot of good individual moments. It just didn't end in team success. They didn't have a signature win, but you can't say that they didn't have signature moments. They had plenty of them.
Well, I think that's a great point, but it also highlights part of the problem. We had great individual moments, but we didn't really have any great team moments because of a lack of consistency, failure to make the right adjustments. And I also think playing tight when the game was close. Now, look, I do want to say, I know the players work hard, the coaches coach hard, and we respect them for that, and we'll always be supportive of them. But, what's true is true. And I don't put this on Ethan, all right? He made a mistake. But what I put it on is a kind of a mindset of this team, a culture that has been with Rutgers for a long time, where, like Gabe said, they can compete. But when do they get over the hump? When do they have that signature win? It's not happening because they're finding ways to lose. And I don't think it's a matter of chance that you find ways to lose. I think it's about mindset. I think the reason Ethan dropped that ball was probably because he was pressing and he was tight.
I think he was just cold.
Well,
I genuinely believe he mishapped that ball because he might have not expected Dennis Sutton to fully commit that fast. I guess he was still waiting for him to really be squeezing on the edge, because for most parts of this game, you could even see it on the previous 4th down attempt, that 4th and 2, where Ethan kept it. Yeah, Dennis Sutton was crashing on that. So he was expecting, I'm guessing, for him to really crash on the running back. So Fletcher was going to be wide open. Regardless, if Ethan was able to nail the pass, Fletcher's still running. So it was primarily because, like I said earlier, his brain went faster than his body. And when he was able to make the pass, he just didn't. I guess it's a thing in football called flinching. One of my coaches brought it up. You flinch. And during parts of this season, Ethan has had some situations where he's flinched. You can say the 4th quarter against Iowa, just the 4th quarter against right now against Penn State. And you can look at that Minnesota game as well. There's been instances where a lot of players on this team flinched in very nail-biting moments. And that was really the destination between a win and a loss.
Yeah,
to the moment.
That's exactly my point, which is when it becomes a high-pressure situation, your brain's going too fast because you're not relaxed, you're not confident, you're like you said, you're flinching, and that's going to hurt you. Now, I don't want to overly criticize him, but we do have a cornerback that on 3rd and 26 gets nailed for a holding play. Well, what do you?
Henderson.
That's a flinch. That's flinching.
There you go. And what happens on 4th and 1 when you can't get a yard, when you've been running all over them all day? And then you go to the broader issues that have affected the team all season. I mean, if you look at Katron Allen, I think Katron Allen was averaging 10.3 yards per carry. 22 carries for 226 yards, and Nick Singleton, 9.6 yards per carry. So it's like the big issues that hurt Rutgers all season, particularly the defense, but also this flinching in pressure moments That's the recipe for finding ways to lose. So, Donovan, I think you hit the nail on the head.
I mean, the only reason why
I just want to add real fast. I was able to take count of how many chunk plays K-Tron and Nick Singleton have in this game, and they had 9 on their own. You can get 7 just on offense. I'm counting the 2 Nick Singleton had on kick return because he was one broken tackle away from potentially having 2 kick return touchdowns. In the same way that Connor Weegent had a kick return touchdown against Rutgers on the first play of their Big Ten play. Nick Singleton was kind of doing the same thing on special teams and being able to, especially for Penn State, to start an opponent's territory, 40 yards and beyond. That was a big advantage for this Penn State offense because they won the game by just running the ball. They didn't throw a ball to a wide receiver until halfway through the third quarter. So a lot of their offense was just running backs and then play action to tight ends. That's how they were able to score their first touchdown to the tight end. I'm blanking on his name right now. Rapalea.
Yeah.
Rapalea. That's how they were able to score the first touchdown, and that's how they were able to ice the game on that 4th and 2 because they ran basically the same type of concept that 8th and Calicomanus and Rutgers ran on that 2nd and 7. It was just this time around, Grunkmeyer was able to make the throw.
Yeah, and Jacoby Henderson, we're talking about flinched. He literally flinched when Rapalea hit him with that fake juke to the right and then just kept running into the lane. I'm not going to be too hard on Jacoby because he is a senior and his eligibility, I believe, is out. But if he had some years remaining, I'd have a lot of constructive criticism for him right now. But I'm holding off because I don't want him to be sad, man. He had 4 years of college football, and that's a good time. If you want to be sad, that's you have the right to be sad about this game, but don't attack players that can't even get a chance to redeem themselves.
Yeah, I just know the vibe in that locker room. I'm lucky to be able to finish off my season on a winning note, and we were able to rejoice. But just being in that type of locker room, I just know it's quiet, a lot of just thinking, a lot of players doing, what if I did this? And right now, this is the last time. I'd say this is the worst time for fans or anybody to really just talk down on the players as a whole. Because right now they're reacting to it the same way a lot of the people in the stands the same way we're reacting to it.
Yeah, and I mean we're talking about flinching in the big moment. Before I talked about that Jacoby Henderson missed chance to tackle, all the previous flinching instances that Donovan mentioned were all in the fourth quarter of games. You mentioned Minnesota, Iowa. You mentioned this game. It was all in the fourth quarter. But I know Thanksgiving already passed, but I mean, it's moments like this that you have to be thankful that they're thankful that they have each other to lean on. We're thankful as a community that there's always next year. And hopefully we can be optimistic about next year like we were this year before those expectations got rattled down a ton. And we're thankful for you guys for being here to join us in this, I would say misery, but I mean, we're here talking about Rutgers football on a podcast, so I'm still happy about that. But you got to take away the little things, man, because the performances that we saw this year, inconsistent at best, and a whole lot of offense to take away from it. But overall, the bad mojo, the bad juju, whatever you want to call it, hopefully we can just push that off to the side. 2025, you had a lot of great individual moments, but as a unit, that one's got to go. That season's just got to go.
Yeah, and go ahead, Donovan.
I said at least, especially for Rutgers, they have things to build on in the offseason going to next year. The thing, especially about playing football, is you got to lose before you learn how to win. You got to lose before you win. And this is one of the games where, especially one of the seasons where you look back at it and go into spring ball and you're just focused on one thing, learning how to finish. And going into next season, you're going to be able to be in situations where last year you weren't able to win those games, but now the tides have turned and you're able to overcome those adversities late in the fourth quarter. And hopefully Rutgers is able to view this season as such, as a stepping stone than more of a setback from last year.
Yeah. I mean, Jason, I know you're disappointed, but it's all we can do at this point is talk about how we can use this season to fuel next season. And it's tough to say because we don't know what over half of our roster is going to look like. We definitely don't know what that defense is going to look like. And that's a good thing because this defense this season, it was a D- at best. I'll argue after today it was an F. And so you can't really get much worse defensively. Let's put an entirely new lineup together and bring it up to a C or a B and shoot for that A every week.
Yeah, and I think one of the critical things is, what did they learn from the failures that they experienced this year? Because if you don't take these failures and learn from them, then you're wasting the failures. What we did this year is we wasted a great offense, one of the best that I've seen
ever. Yeah.
But it was wasted because there was no consistency on defense, no competitiveness really. And I think the key is, my message to the team would be going into next year that the motto is don't flinch, because that is one of the biggest failures of this team is that they did flinch in critical moments. But what have they learned from this experience that's going to make them better? My problem is year after year, I don't see much learning from the failures because it's the same mediocrity, which leads me to a question I have for you guys, which is, if you're KJ, if you're Ian, if you're Antoine, what motivation do you have to come back?
I know what Donovan's going to say, and I agree.
Or say,
when it comes to these situations, I don't have no sort of picking sides because, I know we're primarily a Rutgers podcast, but as a player and seeing players who've been making those decisions, go where it benefits you and your family. And KJ Duff, you're in a situation where right now I could see 3 SEC schools calling his name.
I totally agree. Lane Kiffin, wherever Lane Kiffin goes, and we still don't know, by the way, where Lane Kiffin is going, which tells me one thing. Lane Kiffin himself may not even know.
He was supposed to announce that today around 3:00. We're still waiting. At this point, cue the Jeopardy music. But anyways, let me get back to Rutgers because Lane Kiffin, that time will come, and we will definitely be talking about that on Monday because that overrides Rutgers. That is just national news. But when it comes to Rutgers, Donovan, I thought you were going to say something completely different about how, if you look at Rutgers, the motivation to stay is the fact that they produce talent when it comes to wide receivers and running backs for the NFL. I mean, that's the bigger goal in hand. You want to gel as a unit, as a team. And I get there's going to be a ton of teams calling, and that's going to be making me lose sleep as a KJ Duff supporter, Ian Strong supporter, but, Antoine Raymond supporter. But the one thing that we have that, a few other schools definitely in the SEC and Big Ten still have, but it's one thing that we're not disadvantaged by is lack of NFL talent.
Yeah, I completely agree with you on that, and that would be one of the primary motivations to stick it out with Rutgers and not look into the portal, especially I would say for Antoine Raymond, because Rutgers gave him an opportunity to be an RB1, and I truly believe that if they go into spring ball and CJ Campbell come back, CJ Campbell's going to have to be the complementary piece to Antoine. Antoine's overall through these last 5-6 weeks, I would say since the Purdue game for the most part, or honestly since the Washington game for the most part, he's solidified his role as when you go into the depth chart next season, he's going to be the starting bell cow back. And CJ Campbell's going to have to fit around that. So there's a reason why for some of these players to say, especially a lot of the skill players, to be like, yes, we started off at a different part of this depth chart, and now we're in a starting role. Why not stick it out and say, what if I was a starter for the entire season instead of just the last 8-9 games?
He'd have 1,500, I believe.
Yeah, it's look, this is a loss that, other losses that we had hurt. This one, I don't feel a sense of sadness or even anger. What I feel is that there are very serious problems that need to be addressed, and that we want to be supportive, of course, of the team, but I think the focus should be on, instead of anger and regrets and looking backwards, we got to look forward and fix these things, because if we don't, Coach Schiano's tenure, I think, is going to come to an end after next year, and I wish him well. But I think that, this season was kind of a referendum, with the players we had, as was last season, on where we can go and what we can be. And I think we fell short, and we may lose some star players as a result. So, ultimately, what I'd ask you guys is, some final thoughts on this game. And, of course, we want to let everyone who's watching know that although Rutgers won't be playing any more games, we're going to be here every single week discussing Rutgers football, recruiting in the future. So,
also, we're gonna have a lot of emergency podcasts when that transfer portal opens up.
Yeah. So January 2nd is going to be a day. my final thoughts.
Yeah,
my bad. My final thoughts on this Rutgers game, and I would say this season as well. Wow, that's a crazy move. I would say don't use this as fuel. Use this entire season as fuel for the off season to get you through it. Whether it's all season workouts, especially like the fourth quarter workouts right before spring ball, those last couple of runs that you have to do, last couple of reps in the weight room. Use these losses as fuel to finish, because that's where Rutgers is. They don't have a losing problem right now. Because if Rutgers had a losing problem, they wouldn't have been in this game against Penn State. They honestly wouldn't have been in the game against Iowa, let alone been in the game against Minnesota as well. They were in a lot of these games, and it just didn't flip it on their end. And that's something that you got to go into the all season and say, we just got to be able to learn how to finish. And once we're able to do that, those 5 losses in this year that were primarily because of one-score games, that might flip on their end in next season, and that's going to be major improvement. So for a lot of the returning players, and especially a lot of the players that just got there in the portal this year that still have some years left, I will 100% see it through, because Rutgers isn't so far off.
Yeah, Jason, I 100% agree. I'm not putting that on the screen for obvious reasons, but I do 100% agree. You cannot come into the year ranked number 2 nationally and then go 6-6 and barely beat Rutgers and then brag about it. That's a very bad look. And it shows that their bar is a lot lower. They're not exactly seeking a national championship at this point. They're probably not seeking it next year, and it's going to drive a lot of recruits off if they have that attitude. And Michael, I 100% get it. This is probably the most heartbreaking game I've watched as a Rutgers fan. And as far as this game goes, what are my final thoughts? My final thoughts are the offense was electric for 90% of the year, and it was a joy to watch. It was unfortunate that the defense couldn't match up, but if we have an ounce of that offense next year with an elevated defense, because it's hard to regress at this point defensively, then we're going to be a team to watch out for next year. Now, I know I said that coming into this year, but that's because this defense was actually supposed to carry the team. The defense was what came into the year as the anchor. The offense had a lot of
selling point.
Yeah,
the selling point.
Had a lot of question marks, and the offense was an A+ in terms of the questions. They were all answered. And I also hope that a lot of these players do come back. But when it comes to players that are next up, I mean, I hope that a lot of these guys, Athan, Eric O'Neill, Gus Zielinskis, that they find their way to the NFL. Jay Patel, if he declares, which I believe he's a junior, or is he a senior? Jay Patel.
He's a senior.
Senior, so he's going to declare. I hope he finds a spot because of his field goals consecutively made streak. I believe that he'll at least get a tryout. Athan, I believe, will find a spot. Eric O'Neill should get a tryout. Gus Zielinskis, I believe he will find a spot. But next up, AJ Suris, it's you. We want to get you on this show, talk about your strategy, and then we want to see what you do in the spring game again. And then next year, barring any transfer portal quarterbacks, you're the guy. And we believe in you. You've shown your spurts. I'm excited to see it. AJ, welcome to QB1. Now, as for the rest of the team, we want you to stick around and be Rutgers Scarlet Knight legends. That is the selling point, is that you guys have a chance to be all-time for one program. And you will get paid because our NIL committee is opening up. We are hiring a new NIL chair. Our NIL got opened up. And one last thing, and this is, we talked about how we mean no disrespect to Coach Schiano, but we have to be honest on this show or else it's not a real show. This has to be an ultimatum year next year for Coach Schiano. He has to win at least 7 games, but for his sake, he has to win 8. Otherwise, Kelly Zinn has to do what you don't really like doing, which is relieving people of their duties. And I don't want to say that sentence in jest because Coach Schiano is an all-time legend. And it's not necessarily the highest bar, but we still appreciate you, Coach Schiano. So why don't you save not just your job, but your job security, any questions about it next year? And the rest of the team, I'm excited. I'm excited to see what you can do because it's going to be mostly new guys on defense. And I'm hoping that we retain that big three question marks, And if Ian Strong isn't a Rutgers Scarlet Knight next year, I hope it's because he's trying to reach his dreams a little early rather than seeking a new team.
Yeah, those are great points. And last thing I would say is, number one, for the players. I know you didn't have a great season, but we always support you and wish you the best and know that you worked hard and played hard. Look at this as the beginning of a journey, not as the end of a journey. The season's over, but your journey isn't. You have an opportunity to learn from these failures to become better players and better people. And that's an opportunity. And if you look at it with that mindset, you can be very successful next year. For the coaches and for Coach Schiano, number one, I think recruiting is going to be critically important. You got to get better players, whether it's from high school or from the portal. And Coach Schiano, we always have a tremendous amount of respect for you and admiration for what you've done. But this is not acceptable, and it starts with the culture and the coaching. And I would also say you got to get some better staff. You got to get some better staff that are better coaches and then put players in a position to be more successful. And then what I would say for the administration, particularly Kelly Zinn, we've got to provide the resources to enable Coach Schiano and this program to be successful. Look at the money that LSU is offering Lane Kiffin, not only $90 million salary, but $30 million to recruit the top players in the country. If you're not all in, then how are the players going to buy in? So I think there's got to be changes and improvements from players, coaches, and the administration if we're going to take the next step forward.
Offensive coordinator, quarterback coach, running back coordinator or coach,
defensive line coach.
I was saying
defensive line coach is a need in this offseason.
I was saying all the good ones: offensive coordinator, quarterback coach, running back coach, offensive line coach Pat Flaherty, obviously with offensive coordinator Kirk Sieroka. These guys need to stay. Everybody else with the title coordinator in their name, man, you need to consider swapping them out for someone a little more qualified. That's all I'm saying about that.
They need to go after pass rushers in the portal. I feel like Monday we're going to go into setting what Rutgers portal goals or all season recruiting goals should be, but I'm just gonna spoil one part of my list. They need to get after pass. They got to get pass rushers because that was one of the things that was lacking this season, and especially in this game. Even though they were able to stop the run and in the situations where they were able to get Penn State off schedule, only one sack, and that was Dario Jabone, a linebacker having to make a play on his own. They haven't really gotten a lot of pass rush or any sort of pressure in the pocket for most parts of the season outside of, I would say, the Purdue game and the earlier games this year against Ohio, Norfolk State, and Miami of Ohio. Outside of those few games, they were not able to get a pass rush, and that's something, especially in nowadays college football or just football in general, especially in the Big Ten. You're not going to be able to blitz. A lot of these quarterbacks that most likely Rutgers is going to face next year, they're going to be quarterbacks that are going to be able to win on man coverage because the Big Ten is that place for skill players now. A lot of these wide receivers are better than a lot of the corners, and that's just how it is, just based off of just a lot of the good players wanting to be receivers than being corners nowadays. And you got to be able to get there with a four-man rush. Rutgers honestly have one of the more stagnant four-man rushes this entire year when it comes to just, I would say, Big Ten in general, outside of, I would say, Purdue and Wisconsin, because Wisconsin and Purdue weren't really trying to rush the passer because they were getting blown out. Rutgers needs to improve that, because if they're able to improve in those aspects, this team is going to be able to see a lot more success come the 2025 season.
Yeah, I mean, we're talking about the front four. Eric O'Neill had 2.5 sacks. Bradley Weaver had 2.5 sacks. Jordan Thompson had 1 sack. And that's
not good. That's 6 sacks in 14 games is bad.
Yep. That is it.
That's poor.
For the front four, that is the amount of sacks that we had in our college football season. Big number 6.
Yeah, well, guys, certainly I agree with everything you've said. There's a lot to talk about going forward, and we are going to be doing that here at Rutgers at the Voice of College Football. We're going to be here every Monday. We're going to be reviewing the season, looking towards the future and recruiting and resources and coaching. So even though the year is over for Rutgers, it's not over for Rutgers at the Voice of College Football. And as always, we appreciate you being here. If you like the show, hit that like and subscribe button. And as always, we appreciate your comments. And we will always be supportive of Rutgers football. It didn't end well, but the future can be bright if the right changes are made. So, and of course, as always, thanks to my fantastic co-hosts, Donovan Gibbs, Gabriel Pickup. Go Scarlet Knights, and we'll be right back here just in a couple days at 7 p.m.
Go
Scarlet Knights.